Welcome to PFGM RX. I am your host, Roy Pickett. I have created this YouTube channel as kind of a springboard from my book that I wrote last year, where I described myself as a general manager for a fictional team that I call the Royals, and show how I put a football roster together. Here, we're just 4 days away from the NFL draft in 2020, and I'm continuing on acting like the general manager of the Royals, putting together what my team needs are, how we put a draft board together and go into the draft. As we're having picks being called on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, I'll be making picks for my fictional team. The very first thing I want to talk about is my defensive line, because that's really the strength of my team. When I started this back in 2011, Cameron Jordan was my first draft pick. And then I followed that up with Fletcher Cox in 2012. That's how much I really want to invest in the defensive line in the trenches. Here I show you Chris Jones, who was going to be at the end of his contract. I believe the Kansas City Chiefs are going to franchise tag him or try to work out a long-term deal. I just can't afford it. Basically, with Fletcher Cox and Cameron Jordan making $41.3 million, or 21% of the salary cap, I can't afford Chris Jones anymore. So I'm going to have to let him walk and see if I can find his replacement. One might ask, why would you not just get rid of Cameron Jordan and keep the younger guy? And my answer to that is I just have more loyalty to the guys that brought me here. So I'm going to keep them as long as they're being productive, and both Cox and Jordan are productive. Here I have my linebackers, pretty good shape. Getting kind of concerned with Matt Milano. I believe he's going to be at the end of his contract here, and I'm not knowing if he's going to want more than $8 million a year, or if he's going to be wanting like $15 million a year. So we'll see how that plays out in Buffalo. Here's Xavier Rhodes. He is now a Indianapolis Colt. He's been run out of Minnesota. I kind of saw the writing on the wall last year. I went ahead and drafted DeAndre Baker to be his replacement, but still, with Rhodes off of the roster officially now, that leaves me with just 5 cornerbacks. So I'll probably take a guy like Desmond King or Anthony Brown in the 5th or 6th round this year, just to have enough depth at the cornerback position. Here's 2 of my safeties. I have Sean Williams. He's at the end of his contract, just like Matt Milano. And I have Kevin Byard. I loved having Kevin Byard when he was on his rookie deal. Now that he's the highest paid safety in the NFL, that's getting to be a tough pill to swallow. I'm not saying he doesn't earn it. I'm just saying there's only so much salary cap to give everybody their little pieces of the pie. That was last year. They were about 4.5% of my salary cap, and I believe that has doubled just with Byard's contract alone. So I might be looking, find me some safeties, either Antoine Winfield or Ashton Davis, somebody like that. But we'll see how it all unfolds. Here's my offensive line. I love these guys. Again, you see I pay a heavy price with 1st and 2nd rounders all across the board. I was one of the guys that was pounding the table for Jack Conklin to get that 5th-year option, and essentially I'd be paying him about $13.8 million a year this year if I'd done that. What ended up happening is Tennessee let him walk. He goes up to Cleveland, and he's got a 3-year, $42 million contract, which is essentially $14 million, but just the way that it's structured, in 2020, he's only going to be making $8 million. So that's a very good bargain for my right tackle there. Taylor Lewan, I said last year I didn't care how much he was getting paid. Well, now I'm starting to worry about how much he's getting paid. Again, it's not so much that he's not worth it. I'm pretty sure that Laramie Tunsil's getting ready to be paid by the Houston Texans somewhere north of $19 million a year. but it's just really difficult to pay your left tackle and your franchise quarterback and try to get your defense doing what it needs to do. So I may try to find me a left tackle in this draft, and again, you see, it's either going to be in the first or second round, because I don't think you find too many of those wonderful blindside protectors on day 3. So this is a slide from my team last year. I show you arrows to Austin Hooper and David Johnson. Austin Hooper, love the kid, just couldn't afford to pay him and Zach Ertz. And so he's a free agent and he goes bye-bye. Everybody's saying that this is a horrible tight end draft. So I'm a little concerned about finding his replacement. But I think I can find a guy like Harrison Bryant, Adam Troutman, maybe Bryson Hopkins, that could do the things that I was asking Austin Hooper to do for my offense. Last year, I was very concerned about David Johnson having his injuries and the production falling off. It was just kind of sad because he was really one of my favorite running backs back in 2016. He's coming here to Houston, and so welcome aboard. It's just, I hate trying to figure out how to pay somebody who's being paid more than I want to pay them. So I don't write these contracts. I just go to OTC and see what contracts the guys actually have, and then I try to work it together into the salary cap and see if I could actually afford these guys or not. So David Johnson, going to have to replace him. Austin Hooper, same thing. Now, Kyle Juszczyk. He's probably one of my favorite players on my team. He's on the field for about 45% of the offensive plays. I like having him out there as a decoy. He keeps the defenses guessing. They can't get into sub packages. He contributes about 9% of the passing production. I love the guy. He's in the last year of his contract, and it's at $6.7 million, which isn't, like a $20 million defensive lineman, but it's a lot to pay for a fullback. Last year, I got Alec Ingold. He's more of a downhill, pave the way kind of guy. I might take a look and consider Josiah DeGara from Cincinnati or Charlie Tompano from Portland State. They have a little bit more, they're tight ends in college, so they're like Kyle Juszczyk in that fact that you can use them on passing plays. And I like that. So here's the elephant in the room. Patrick Mahomes. How am I going to keep a strong roster together and still pay this man the largest contract in NFL history? I've had to allow good players to leave in free agency, like Chris Jones and Austin Hooper. I'm going to have to replace some of the most expensive players with high draft picks and hope that they pan out. I'm looking at you, Taylor Lewan. Trading veterans for draft picks. That was part of the thing with David Johnson. Not only did we get DeAndre Hopkins in return, but got a second-round draft pick, or got a fourth-round draft pick. I'm going to be, utilizing my hypothesis that I'm going to have to spend less money on wide receivers and running backs. The premise being that great quarterbacks can make an average wide receiver good. I want to continue to maintain a good offensive line for protection for the quarterback, as well as creating running lanes for my running backs. So I think if I can just, spend my money wisely on the offensive line, and like I said, when the offensive line gets too expensive, then, replacing them again with those high draft picks and hope that they can pick up where the other guy just left off. So that's my quandary here. Now, I've mentioned this before, DeAndre Hopkins. Last year I was so concerned about David Johnson's contract. I'm like, I got to figure out how to cut him, release him, trade him, something. But he's not going to be on my roster very much longer because I can't pay him the $10 million. I just don't do that with running backs. So I went out and I drafted David Montgomery to become his eventual replacement on his rookie contract. Kind of the same thing, going back to my philosophy. I'm going to get rid of the higher priced players and try to find their cheaper replacements because they're on rookie contracts. So that's what I did with Stephon Diggs and Tyler Lockett. They were excellent players for me, but their contracts, when they got on those second deals, were eating up salary cap. So I'm like, I'll just go ahead and get rid of those guys and draft the next two. And so I got Michael Gallup and Christian Kirk, and they were going to be the targets for my quarterback, who turned into Patrick Mahomes. Okay, so here's where reality crosses over with fiction. I was able to unload David Johnson for DeAndre Hopkins. Now, if I had written that in a book, people would have said, you are being far-fetched and wouldn't believe it. But this is what actually happened. So now I'm just kind of waiting to see what Steve Keim does in terms of a contract extension. The word on the street was the reason Bill O'Brien got tired of having DeAndre Hopkins wasn't because of his play on the field, but was because he was wanting a new contract, and he still had 3 years left on his old one. So if you already are budgeting, I'm going to pay you $12 million a year for the next 3 years, and you want me to pay you $20 million a year for the next 3 years? That's going to throw your budget out of whack, especially when you're trying to sign your left tackle and your franchise quarterback. Not to mention everyone else on the roster starts coming and knocking on your door saying, hey, I know I still got like 3 years left on my deal, but can I get a raise now too? So I can understand Bill O'Brien's point of view on that front. But now that I have DeAndre Hopkins on my team, love the guy. I had a video last year where I was showing him and Michael Thomas being the two best wide receivers in the NFL. I said if anybody deserved $19 million a year, it should be DeAndre Hopkins. I just don't want to be the general manager that's giving it to him because, again, I've got to try to figure out how I'm paying Patrick Mahomes. So it'll be interesting to see how that whole thing is handled in Arizona. They are lucky that they have Kyler Murray currently, who is on his rookie contract, so they can afford to pay Hopkins while Murray's being played on his rookie deal. So, after going through all of my roster, I kind of scrubbed it. What are my team needs? Left tackle, Taylor Lewan's contract's getting kind of heavy. Defensive tackle, Chris Jones left, and Fletcher Cox, Cameron Jordan are not getting any younger. Tight end, Austin Hooper left in free agency, and I like to run 12 and 22 personnel about 40% of the time, so I need that extra tight end. My linebacker and strong safety, Matt Milano and Sean Williams, are at the end of their contracts after this year, so going to have them, but I may need their replacements for next year, already kind of in the building. Xavier Rhodes is gone. It cost me $4.8 million, but it was worth not having to pay him the money that I was paying him. Now, Chris Ballard signed him and got a reasonable contract for him. It's a one-year prove-it deal. But for me to keep him, it was going to cost me way too much, and I decided to let him go. Running back David Johnson was traded. I mean, it was great to get DeAndre Hopkins in the building, but now I've got to find another running back because I do the running back by committee thing. Interesting enough, I have Montgomery and Tariq Cohen, the Bears backfield. So it'll be interesting to see if the Bears draft the same running back that I do during this draft. I could use a kicker. Last year I had the idea that I would go with Tracy Cole from LSU. He never really stuck in the league. For whatever reason, I don't know. And Chase McLaughlin, he's the kicker for the Colts right now. So I could use an upgrade at that spot. And punter, I had Jack Fox, and he's from Rice down here in Houston. I could use some competition for him as well. So maybe Braden Mann as a punter and Tyler Bass as a kicker. That would be something to look forward to. So, going into the 2020 draft, I'm going to use the Vikings draft picks. At the end of the regular season, I pick the team that's most similar to my own. And if they're in the playoffs, I don't want to be biased after the playoffs are over. So I can go, oh, I got the loser in the first round, so I get the highest draft picks. I don't do that. I try to see who has a similar philosophy And the Vikings met my criteria. They have Gary Kubiak, Kirk Cousins, the zone blocking scheme. Their defense is tenacious. They also had traded Stephon Diggs like I had the year before, and they received compensation for that. So instead of me just saying, hey, I cut him, I'm like going retroactively, I guess. This is all fiction anyway. So I was like, instead of me just cutting him last year, say I traded him to the Bills for their picks this year. It seems like compensation. Anyway, I'll be losing my second round draft pick, number 58, for the Hopkins trade, and I picked up their 131st. So it was a second and a fourth rounder that got exchanged. And those will be my draft picks. So this is my own process. Everybody has their own way of doing things. What I do is I look at mock drafts, and then I participate in them. I got some followers on Twitter. We got together as 32 individual GMs and did a virtual mock draft, just like the NFL is going to be doing. And as we do a couple of these, you can start seeing some patterns. Who's all in the first round, who's getting picked in that second round, who's being in the third round. And you get an idea if I like Clyde's Edwards-Helaire and he's like being picked 72, 85, 78. You can kind of get an idea of where you should be taking this guy in the draft. So that's what I do as far as a big board. I don't have all 254 guys because there'll be some guys that are drafted in a mock draft that'll be an undrafted free agent in real life, and vice versa. So I just try to pick guys that I think have a legitimate shot of being drafted. So I have about 180 here on this microfiche that you're looking at. So then I take that average draft position of where they are in their rounds, and then I kind of assort them by position. So I have Kyle Duggar, Antoine Winfield, Jeremy Chin, and Ashton Davis, all in that 50 to 60 range at safety. And so they're over here. And then I have kind of a drop off when Kayvon Wallace is down at like 127. Brandon Jones is like 130. So this way I can kind of see where there's a lot of talent and where there's some scarcity, and where I need to jump from one position to another, even if they're in a similar situation. So I have my team needs, I have my value board, and then I can see if there's a run. So let's say if I was wanting a guard and Cesar Ruiz goes in the first round and Hennessy is off the board, I might go, I might want to go ahead and get Cushenberry, or can I wait until somewhere around 87 to get Tyler Biotish? So there's not a whole lot of interior offensive linemen. I need to be targeting individuals. Whereas in my wide receiver column, it's stacked. I got a whole bunch of them. If I don't get one early, I can probably get one late. The tight ends, that it's not a very big slice of people there to choose from. So I'm looking like I'll be targeting a tight end no later than the third round, just to make sure that I get one. It might be a reach. I have Adam Troutman being selected at 110, but if I were to like take him at 89, and I know that I have him on my roster, I wouldn't feel too bad about it. Anyway, so that's my draft board by round value, and that's kind of chapter 2, or the second book, if you will, of PFGM RX. I gave you all of the details in the book about how I put the team together in the first place, and this is more of just how I be maintaining it for for the 2020 season. Hope you enjoyed this. Kind of give you some ideas of my processes, and thank you. You can follow me on Twitter at PFGMRX.